Welcome everyone. Welcome to the online paper presentation session of one-day international seminar on diaspora literature, exclamation for the crisis of space and identity, organized by the Department of English in collaboration with IQAC of Haji Eke Khan College, Horiharpara, Murshidabad. As we all know that this session was to be held yesterday, but we could not arrange it due to miserable weather condition. And this session is being held today. At the very first place, I would like to thank you for your overwhelming response that we get in spite of the short notice. We are organizing this seminar. So thank you for that. We are really touched by it. And thank you all for your kind support and cooperation. We will have this paper presentation session and the list of paper presenters is already being posted in the group. I hope you have gone through it. This session will be chaired by Dr. Sujata Bose, Assistant Professor of Professor Soyed Nurul Hasan College, Farakka, Murshidabad. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Vidisha.
Okay. And we are going to allot 10 minutes to each presenter. Kindly maintain it. And now we are going to start this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Vidisha. So we have a list of 7 presenters that you see from the list that has been shared in the group. So we're wasting much time. Let us begin with our first presenter, Ms. Prabha Priyadashini Mahapatra. It's over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, of course, you are audible.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to be here today. Welcome you all to this international conference. And I am Pragya Priyadarshini Mahapatra, and I am honored to be the first presenter of the day. And we all know that we have gathered here today from various parts of the world to share ideas, insights, experiences on the issues of identity and diaspora. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the organizers for putting together this wonderful event and for giving me the opportunity to speak in front of such great testimonial. Thank you, Sujata ma'am, also. So, without further ado, let's get started. So, I am going to present my screen. Just a minute. Is my screen visible?
Absolutely.
Just so here my paper entitled Ruthless Exploring Diaspora and Identity Crisis in Chitra Banerjee novel. So firstly we have to know about Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni. I know that you all are aware of her. She is an Indian American author.
Sorry, ma'am. Sorry to interrupt. Are you presenting PowerPoint slides?
Yes, ma'am.
But those slides are not visible. I think the screen of your phone is visible, but The PowerPoint has not been presented here.
Means I have to present only the paper.
No, no, no. You can, of course, you can present your PowerPoint, but that is not visible to us.
Okay, then just a minute. Okay,
Okay.
okay, just a minute then. Is it visible now?
Slides are not yet visible.
Is it visible now?
Yes. Now it is visible. Now it's visible.
Sorry for the disturbance because we have this construction. Ruthless, exploring diaspora and identity crisis in Chitra Banerjee Divyakari's novel. So first we have to know her because I know that all of you are aware of her. So she is an Indian American author, poet, journalist, you can say it all. She has published in over 50 magazines, including the Atlantic Monthly and the New Yorker. Began her writing career as a poet. After that, she became a novelist. First, women prejudice and the vision of model female and their resist for their identity is her main theme of her novel, and she shows Indian feminine link in what ways women are treated by the male patterns, because we know that we are living in the male dominated society, or you can say patriarchal society. So, uh, hearing my title's name, the question may be arise that what is rootless. So here the term rootless typically refers to someone who lacks a sense of connection to a specific place or cultural heritage. So I have already told that we are living in the patriarchal society. So this there is a lack of sensation or connection between the male dominated society and the feminine society. In the context of the woman's identity, it could refer to a woman who feels disconnected from her cultural or ancestral root and may struggle to find a sense of belonging or identity as a result. For example, we can take the female one. She is understood as an inferior one due to this male patriarchal society, and for that reason she is searching for the identity or the individuality. The sense of being rootless can create feeling of uncertainty and the dislocation, but it can be also opportunity for growth and self discovery as women explore, and that can be define their identities. So the main theme or the main struggle of women is for identity. And women have historically faced many societal and cultural barriers that have limited their opportunity and autonomy. For a family, the woman or the girl child was already have to suffer due to the status of the family. This is from the ancestral time. And additionally, women have often been marginalized in various aspects of society, including education, politics, and the fireplace, which can make it difficult for them to gain access the source and opportunity they need to develop. And furthermore, women have been always objectified and sexualized in popular culture and in the society, which can be harmful stereotypes. And that is a sense of struggle for identity among the women. So, and there is a big fight means women's resistance to live in a practical society. It is not at all easy because living in a practical society can be difficult for women. So, society are often characterized by gender inequality, then where men hold more powerful and privileged than women. And in that society, women are often marginalized and discriminated against both socially and legally. They face a range of challenges that can make it difficult for them to fully realize their potential and life fulfilling lives. And here, what is the views or what is the focus of Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni's on women's identity? We can say that, or we can notice in her every writing, each and every writing, she wrote many novels focusing on the women's struggle, women's identity, about the practical society. So in her writings, she often emphasizes the complexity and diversity of women's identity and the challenges and opportunity that came with navigating different cultural, social, and personal contexts. For example, if you are taken considered for the best novel of her, that is The Palace of Illusion, and in that she characterizes the character of Draupadi or Panchali in the perspective or the views of a woman, because we read Mahabharata as the perspective of the all the world wars and all the male characters, was she written out means focused, fully focused on Draupadi's character. Divakaruni's writing often portrays women who are struggling to assert their identity and find their voices in the face of societal expressions and limitation. So here the views on women's identity of Divakaruni are nuanced and multifaceted because it reflects the complexity and diversity of women experiences. And she always trying to portray women as complex, dynamic individuals who can capable of overwhelming society barriers. Then Chitravari makes many works on diaspora and identity. So her works often focuses the character who struggle a sense of dislocation and alienations. And here the often known that is the mistress of spices. So here there is a protagonist named Tilo, and she is a immigrant who runs a spice shop in Auckland, that is situated on California. And while she has the ability to use her spices to help others, she also struggles with a sense of loneliness and isolation. You can't believe her the unbearable struggle and situation of her. Then there is a novel of Chitra Banerjee Devakaruni, that is Arranged Marriage, and here Devakaruni explores the experience of a young woman who are sent to America for arranged marriages and must navigate the challenges of adapting new culture while maintaining their cultural status and values. So the topic is not beyond to this, because there are many much more topic to explore on Divakaruni's novel, but due to the bound of time, I have to conclude now. So in overall the study, Divakaruni's novels on diaspora identity crisis are powerful exploration of the complexity of cultural identity and its impact on individual, particularly on women. Her characters often grapple with the questions of identity, belongings, struggling to reconcile the expectation of their families and cultural tradition with the pressure and opportunity of the new lives in the West or in India or outside of the India. Her writing challenges those limitations that encouraging women to assert their independence and individuality. That is the quest for identity of the women in the face of societal expectation and pressure, because women are already in very much pressure due to their family, due to their husband, due to their children. For that reason, women are going to forget about herself. And here in Divakaruni's work, that is a very good thing that Divakaruni always focuses on the issues of women. And her work encourages empathy, understanding, empowerment, and offers a rich, nuanced exploration of the complexity of cultural identity and its impact on our experiences, interactions with the world. Firstly, we can take Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni as an example, because she also belongs to a male dominated family, and she faces a lot of stage to reach here now, which the position is her, because she worked very hard to get a identity of her own self. So thank you all.
I'm really for taking the time. I hope you have presented very well. Reflect exploring diaspora identity crisis in Diva Karuni's novels. We have focused on three main novels: The Palace of Illusions, The Arranged Marriage, and The Mistress of Disciples. I have tried to point out how the characters, the women characters, fought for existence and how they emerged as the new woman in Diva Karuni's novel. Okay, I open the session for questions. If any of the presenters or participants have any questions, you can ask.
Questions are very much welcome. So,
Shohel Aziz. Any
yes,
questions? Any questions from the presenters?
I think he has not joined this meeting. Then you can, ma'am, you can go to the next presenter. And now, just a minute. Everyone is requested to write their name and designation in the chat box. Kindly.
Okay,
thank you all.
I think no more questions are going to come.
I think one of the participants has raised his hand.
Okay, you can ask. Yes. So, no questions, I see. Then can we move on? I think, yeah, we can move on. Take Jaul Hawk will be our next presenter. His paper is on a dubious adaptation after a forced migration as presented in Nadine Gordimer's short story, The Ultimate Suffering. Are you present, Take Jaul Hawk?
I think he is not present.
Then we can to the next presenter, Sangeeta Das. Sangeeta Das is present, I see.
Yes, she is present.
You can start with it.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon to the chairperson and to all the other participants in the meet. I extend my gratitude to the organizers of this seminar, which is entitled International Seminar on Diaspora Literature, exclamation for the crisis of space and identity. It is being organized by Haji A.K. Khan College, and in keeping with the theme of, sync with the theme of the seminar, my paper is entitled Reclaiming Identity in Black Women Writing, a study of Buchi Emecheta's Second Class Citizen. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, absolutely, we are audible.
Okay, thank you. So in this very short period, though I have a very long paper, I would just focus on the story, since it is the seminar is actually talking about diaspora, and it is talking about reclaiming identity, reclaiming space. It becomes all the more significant when the writer is a woman, when the writer is a Black woman, and when the writer is an immigrant, who is part of the Black diaspora. So here, my writer is Buchi Emecheta, who is actually a Nigerian. She was born in 1944, and she moved to England as a married woman in 1962. So she is writing as a Black woman, and she says in interviews that when she was writing, the typical themes that which actually informed diasporic writers or the post-colonial themes we have seen, they have informed her novels as well. And there is an inevitable perspective of feminist studies which she actually provides, but which she was completely not aware of, as she writes that I did not know that by doing, or that is by writing novels, I was going to be called a feminist. But if I am now a feminist, then I am an African feminist with a small f. So this is in her own words. And a little bit about Black women's writing. Actually, it belongs to a tradition. The Black women writing has a particular tradition, and it is influenced by how Black women perceive themselves and the world around them. The struggle for survival and the quest for identity is an important part of Black women's literature. They write primarily for themselves, who have mostly been suppressed under social constraints. The Black women have not only struggled against the white racists, but also a Black patriarchal society replete with gender bias that relegates women to an object of second class order. And it is from that perception that she has titled her novel Second Class Citizen. And it is perhaps how women have been categorized throughout ages as being second class, of the second order. Black women writers not only portray Black women's resistance to the predetermined stereotype of womanhood and motherhood, but they also put great emphasis on Black women's personal growth towards self-reliance and independence. So we see that in the novel, which is partly autobiographical, it is her own confession. Buchi Emecheta herself says, and it is through the main protagonist. It is through the protagonist Ada, the female protagonist, that the life of Buchi Emecheta is perhaps made known to the readers. So Ada is a child and she dreams of being schooled like her brother boy. Here I would certainly emphasize on the word dream, because education was and perhaps is still a dream of many girls. This she dared to dream in spite of being born as a girl in patriarchal Igbo, that is the community, the Nigerian community to which she belongs. African society believes in gender-oriented roles and practices gender discrimination. It's not just African society. We know that is a universal truth. So Ada runs to school defying male ego of the Igbo tribe and earns the nickname Igbo Tigress. Ada secretly nurtured another dream, and that was to go to the United Kingdom and become like the lawyer, Nwezi. As a small girl, she thought going to the United Kingdom must surely be like paying God a visit. The United Kingdom then must be like heaven. So she marries Francis, another fellow Nigerian, a student, and persuades him to continue his studies in London and paves the way for her own flight to the land of her dreams, where she believed that she will be liberated from traditional bindings and reclaim her selfhood. So it is almost like paving the path to the achievement of a kind of American dream, where she thought that a white society would perhaps not, make her a victim of several discriminations, which will be a shocking eye opener for her. Interestingly, it is Ada who finances her family of in-laws, including her study abroad from her well-paid job in the American Consulate Library in Lagos. Later, she follows her husband to England along with her two small children. On her arrival in England, Ada receives a cold welcome. She realizes that the real England is different from the promised land of her dreams. The London experience of Emecheta's own life is embedded in the novel through the travails of Ada as a Black immigrant, forming the part of the diaspora. Ada becomes a second-class citizen in London. This subordinate status of a Black immigrant is not a matter of economics, but it is racial. Francis tells her, very significantly, everyone is coming to London, the West Indians, the Pakistanis, and even the Indians, so that African students are usually grouped together with them. As I was talking about, that it is the diaspora, the concept of diaspora is no more, it is not just being attached to a particular country or a particular continent. It is becoming a part of a grand issue or a grand title, which is the Black diaspora. As Francis says, we are all Blacks, all colored, and the only houses we can get are horrors like this. So this is from the text itself. Thus, there was a denial of access to basic things needed for a decent survival, and Ada had to manage in a very small room with a single bed. Ada enjoyed a privileged life in Nigeria, but here she sees that life is very different and extremely difficult. To her utter disgust, her fellow Nigerians, including her husband, had willingly settled for a second-class citizenship, but Ada refused to accept such a designation. She transcended the limits of her black identity and applied for educated jobs. Not only that, she also transgressed many of the norms set down by the Nigerian diaspora in the United Kingdom, because she refuses to foster her children out, as is the norm of the Nigerian migrant community, thus claiming her roles both as a mother and a working woman. With education, she manages to free herself and establish herself as an individual. Ada's struggle against the outside forces of racism, the domestic brutalities, sexism, and oppression in both the countries expand through most of the narrative. Oppressed and discriminated against as a woman in Nigeria, Ada expects that she will find comfort and happiness in Britain. Britain will free her from all prisons. She suffers ill treatment from Francis, who is her husband, who is limited by patriarchy to look beyond the wife as a sexual object and a caretaker of the home. Francis could not rise above his typical tribal culture complex and creates disharmony at home. He refuses to take proper care of the children and irresponsibly impregnates Ada, the sole bread winner of the family in London. However, the Tigress Ada, as she has been nicknamed, Ada's indomitable spirit helps her to triumph against these obstacles and creates the writer in her, which had been her long cherished dream since her school days in Nigeria. So, writing saves her from losing sanity and helps achieve economic independence and individual identity. Writing, as Emechita observes, is therapeutic. She says that women who would be writers are not so lucky. They are regarded as eccentrics, extreme feminists, or even lesbians. To a world, especially the African world, still regards the premise of serious writing as a masculine preserve. And it is in that society, in that world, that Ada has transgressed all the norms, all the boundaries, and dared to take up a profession, dared to follow a passion and a dream. And that is how she reclaims her identity. This leads to the final collapse of the marriage. Francis disowns his wife and children in an open court. He burns the marriage certificate as well as the birth certificates of his children. In spite of all the shocking betrayal and humiliation, Ada boldly declares in court, don't worry, sir, the children are mine, and that is enough. I shall never let them down as long as I am alive. So, despite the domestic challenges, Ada never surrenders her dream of becoming a writer. The first two novels of Emechita are semi autobiographical, both the novels. In the Ditch and Second Class Citizen, they record the events of her childhood in Nigeria and married life as a black immigrant in London. They dramatize Emechita's own struggle for survival and identity and her emergence as a creative writer eventually. Ada began to read to enrich herself culturally. She becomes familiar with the works of African authors like Chinua Achebe, James Baldwin, Flora Noppa. Karl Marx also cast a spell on her. The act of writing affirms her dignity and helps her, yes, ma'am, and helps her to claim her grit and determination with which she would refuse to accept the second class status. She seamlessly coheres the profession of a writer into the cultural concept of a mother, which was indoctrinated in her from the Igbo society. Like her creator, Emecheta, Ada also is a writer and a dedicated mother who did not remain circumscribed by the traditional functions of wife and mother. Both have attained that sublime space which is known as emancipation. Thank you. That's all how I could sum up rather a big paper in a very brief time.
Thank you, Sangeeta Das. We had good papers here on reclamation of the identity of Ada in the second class citizen. Yeah. Open to questions. If anyone has any questions regarding her paper, you can ask. Well, if not, we can. Yes. Yes.
My question to Shomika ma'am is, Since you have spoken on identity and the struggle that black women faces, and all the, you have mentioned the entire, the legacy of the black women's writing. So I would like to mention one name, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, which is a very, recent edition. So don't you find that the crises are almost the same if you read those novels as well? Or how do you think that this, do you find that their writings are the strategies of survival in some way or other, or how do you address this? I mean, Buchi Emechita's writings were published, in the 70s, and Chimamanda's writings are, of late. They were published during 2013, 17, but identity issues almost same if you read them.
Yes, thank you, Aparna. I of course I agree with you, and even I have touched upon that. You know whatever you are saying is, it is a never-ending process. It never sees any solution. It will go on and on. And I have said that it is not just the term diaspora, the term identity crisis. These are not just related to a few countries and a few continents. They actually form at the end. They just form two binaries: the white world and the black world, the male and the female. It is again restricted. It become, however diverse it is, whichever country it is coming from, whichever language it is being written in, or whichever time period it belongs to, they all end up reaching there. And the fight is again between the two binaries, the whites and the blacks, and the males and the females. And that is what I have said, that whether it is the West Indians or the Pakistanis or the Indians or the Africans, they all have been grouped together as the black community, black diaspora. And whether it is being written in 1920s or 30s or 1830s, however we go back, or however we move forward, it is the same crisis. And it is the works are, of course, time is changing, and works are are being better produced, okay, they are offering more theories, they are offering more subtexts, but the agenda remains the same. Yes, I agree with it.
Thank you so much, madam.
Okay, any more questions? Well, then we can move on to our next presenter, Himadri Datta. Thank you, Shangita.
Yeah, good afternoon to all the respected members here, and special hello to Samim sir. I think he left a little bit ago, so very dear person in my life. So my topic is related to Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni. We already had one paper first. So since time is short, I will just first read my abstract, which will give you a fairly nice idea about what I have tried to argue in this paper. Then I will try to go in some little detail about the idea. So the title of my paper, which I have maintained here, is The Indian Diasporic Feminine, and reading through the lens of Divakaruni. So what I have mentioned in my abstract is the study of feminism in connection with the diaspora that Divakaruni has attempted in her novels. And what we find in her novels, especially, that she has tried to present this concept of the diaspora, and especially in the relation to the feminine in a feminist perspective, both within and outside. So I will read a few lines from the abstract first, that the history and progressive phases of this theory is quite pointing towards the West. And in the 19th century, we have a very huge advent of this feminist concerns inside India, especially during the Bengal Renaissance. And the novels of Divakaruni, especially novels like Sister of My Heart, is very much contextualized in this 19th century Bengal. Although the story is quite modern, but the old Kolkata and these kind of scenarios are very interesting in this regard. So I'll go into that. And the feminist and diasporic discourse naturally becomes a very integral characteristic component of this Indian post-colonial period, where most of her novels could be situated. And her novels have opened up new spaces for this discourse and insight into the annals of Indian womanhood from the classical times up to the present, via retelling of ancient national tales, histories, and also modern myths or stories. So I'll just go into a kind of discussion of story-like manner. I have focused here into two of her novels, or rather two types of her novels. One is the category where she is mainly rewriting the Indian myths or histories like the Mahabharata and the Ramayana in novels like The Palace of Illusions and The Forest of Enchantment. So there also I could find this sense of diaspora, especially see where the 14-year say forest phase of Sita. So that could be seen as a diaspora within the nation where she has to, she becomes a diaspora within, and then when she is taken to Lanka. So I tried to argue this in my paper. And also in Mahabharata, I have also tried to observe this, that especially the phases and especially in the Lakshadweep, these kind of things. And another interesting thing which I found in the modern novels, such as The Mistress of Spices, is very interesting in this regard. The character of the spice mistress is a very, very mystic, especially in the Oriental point of view. So she is an Indian woman with a very mysterious origin. She lives in America, so the modern America, which is completely, modern in the sense science oriented, believes in modernism or postmodernism through science. So here we have a lady who heals people through her Indian spices, through the magical potions, and the very, very modern land is unable to find that where is these powers coming from. So this sense of diaspora, the alienation from the home that she faces, and still how she has made this land into a next home and so on. Another novel which I've argued in my paper is Sister of My Heart, where we have a big parallel with another novel from the 19th century by Thackeray, that is Vanity Fair. So especially that also has two women, that is Becky Sharp and Amelia Sedley. Here we have two ladies who are born on the same day. They are cousins basically. One is Shrodha, the other is Anjali Anju. So the latter has to move to America after her marriage, and then the two sisters are sharing their experiences. One is in the nation; she is married from Bardhaman. She's from Kolkata. She comes to Bardhaman, and the kind of sense of alienation that she feels out of place, even though it is within the same nation, rather the same state. And how she shares her experiences with her sister, who is far away in America, which is quite an alien place, and how they share up, they try to gear up with their lives, and then finally they reunite. So this is what I've tried to argue in my paper, the sense of diaspora through the feminine, which she tries to represent, and both through the novels from the classical to the modern. So this is how I would like to sum up in this brief time without going into much detail. So maybe later I could share my paper in the full length. So I will end up here. So thanks a lot. So any questions? So I will.
If we have time, we could review but focus on uh, travels of explanation is really interesting. Well, any questions for Madhuri? No. Well, then we can Somaji Ghosh. Next lecture. The topic is relocating the identities in a foreign land, a case study of Jhumpa Lahiri's The Lowland. Is he here, Somaji Ghosh?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
You can start.
Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay. Is my PPT visible?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, yes, it is visible and you are audible too. You can
And my
start.
PPT is visible?
Yes, yes.
Okay, okay. So yeah, good afternoon everyone. And so my topic is basically on Jhumpalari's the lowland and relocating the identities in the foreign land. So yeah, the rise in the migratory movements across the world in the post-colonial era has paved the path for diaspora literature. Diaspora writing is rooted into the theme of this loss of our own identity concept mostly. Diaspora writers like Jhumpalari, who has chosen to write about the issue of diaspora, concentrated on depicting the immigrant crisis of identity, racial and cultural divergence, alienation of the mind, and the loss of sense of belongingness. And it also shows that the history of immigration in the history of feeling uprooted and lost in a different time and space and its after effects. My paper tries to bring forth reality of Indian immigrant community which survives amid the problems of alienation, nostalgia, and cultural clash and identity confusion in the diasporic landscape. This paper attempts to trace out the diasporic sensibility in the selected novel, that is Jhumpalari's Lowland, and Jhumpalari as a second generation Indian diaspora writer in her novel, 2013 novel The Lowland, which addresses the characters who have been removed from their homeland to a host country and the persistent diasporic sensibilities within them. Uh, to talk about the basic overview of the story, The Lowland basically tells the story of two brothers who have the age gap of 15 months but are always together since childhood till the young age. The elder brother Subhash is realistic and careful, whereas the younger brother Udayan is rebellious by nature. And the rising of Naxalite movement in the 1960s created a chaos and commotion in the city of Kolkata. Therefore, Subhash leaves the city and goes to US to pursue his PhD, and thus he gets rid of the troubled city. The younger brother, well, Udayan, led by the notions of equality and justice, he takes part in the Naxalite movement, and uh, but eventually uh, that led to a um, uh, unwanted ending. And here you can see also his short love affair with Gauri, a student of philosophy, and their eventually result in their love marriage. Uday's involvement in various violent activities brings him in a doom. He is shot dead by the police in the lowland just behind his house, just beside his house. And on getting the news about Uday's death, Subhas comes back to home from America. And out of his desire to help Gauri, who is pregnant with Uday's baby, Subhas marries her and takes her to US with him so as to save her from the hardship of a widow life in Indian society. In the next part of the story, though Shubha's intentions behind this marriage were generous, we can see that after the marriage, uh, for the sake of his attachment with Udayan and for better prospects for Gauri her and her unborn child, what Subhash receives out of this marriage is nothing but alienation, and that psychologically makes him feel displaced. Their marriage unofficially comes to an end after 12 years. After his father's death, Subhash and Bella, when go back to India for 6 weeks. When they return to Rhode Island in America, they find that Gauri is not there, and Gauri has left a letter informing them that she has got a job in a university and she is going to California. The rest of the novel tells the story of their complicated relationships and guilt and repentance in the backdrop of diaspora. The choices made by the two major characters, Subhas and Gauri, become main cause of their diasporic dilemma, memory and nostalgia about their present life, and that continuously haunt them. Mm. A person feels alienation when he or she migrates from known place to an unknown place. Subhas experiences sense of alienation in the early period of migration to America. In his early days in Rhode Island, he misses his family and life at hometown, and it increases his loneliness. But gradually he adapts there, and later, when he returns to India, he forgets to act like an Indian instead as an American. Subhash already got adjusted to American culture. In order to prove himself as an American, he does everything as the Americans define to be a citizen of from a citizen of USA. Almost all the characters in the lowland appear simple in nature except Gauri. Gauri is able to alienate herself regardless of any purpose, and it results in identity crisis for Gauri that identifies her, her diasporic feeling. The past is always present in Gauri's memory, and she is never able to get rid of tragic memories of Udon's death. A feeling of guilt also haunts her. She shatters society's perceived notions of ideal woman and embarks on her journey to discover herself without seeking justification. Subhash and Udan, on the other hand, are guided mostly by the ideology and responsibility. Udan, where he was a revolutionist by nature, but somehow his notions of ideal country and justice are misguided, and ultimately it brings catastrophe to his family. While Subhash, being a cautious and responsible person, dedicates his life to well-being of others, but becomes helpless as what he receives in return is loneliness only. The only second-generation diasporic character in the novel is Bella, Gauri and Udon's daughter. Bella lives a ruthless and aimless life like a gypsy. During her childhood, she suffers psychologically and even makes attempts to commit suicide. She grows up motherless, and when she becomes young, she keeps distance from her father and does odd jobs at various farms out of her love for environment. Bella impulsively revolts against her parents and rejects the lifestyle their parents led. She alienates herself as well. Uh, To conclude, the lowland addresses complicated identities of the character who possess split personalities and have become members of diaspora by their fate. Uton's death is the starting point from when the identities of major characters evolve and negotiate with one another. On account of secret of Bella's parenthood, Subhash and Gauri experienced alienation from Bella. Within a very short period of her marriage with Subhash, she comprehends worthlessness in her new identity as a wife of Subhash. Gauri is unable to identify herself with Subhash's wife, and then she cannot bring herself to love him, and simultaneously, she also fails to give justice to her role and identity as a mother. Her casual attitude towards Bella is the result of her conflict with her identity. In Lyri's work, the Lowland traces the development of characters through the troubled times of Naxalite movement. She uses the historical setting which influenced several youths of the country to engage in intellectual and armed battles with the existing government. As a diaspora writer, in her Lowland, Jumpalahiri deals with a multicultural and post-colonial society, both from in and out. The two main characters, Subhas and his wife Gauri, who born and brought up in India, are shown as a diasporic identities in the story of the novel, and their continuous uh, seek for the identity and the uh, reclaiming their self in a foreign land. Thank you.
Trying to show how the characters in Jhumpalai's novel were in psychological disturbance because of their ruthlessness and how each of them tried to relocate their identity in a foreign land. It was an excellent paper. Now open to questions. Any questions for Somadip Ghosh? I think no. Then we can move on to our next presenter, Dr. Devabruta Banerjee. And the title of his paper is Retrieving Memory or Resisting Cultural Assimilability, Indian Food in the Foreign Soil. Are you present, Dr. Devabruta?
Yes, madam. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly.
Yeah. Please allow me to present my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon to the respected chairperson and all my colleagues present here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to present my paper titled Retrieving Memory or Resisting Cultural Ascendancy, Indian Food in the Foreign Soil. Due to the paucity of time, I have the screen that may be read here. So, starting with my paper, our Indian scriptures, the ancient Indian scriptures, have testified that what one eats expresses his or her character. The balance of the three gunas or essence of all things, namely sattva, rajasu, and tamasu, play a very significant role in the evolution of one's temperament. A.K. Ramanujan has made a significant observation regarding this in his essay Food for Thought that can be read here. As varied is the culture of India, so is its food. Food provides a distinct identity to the culture of a community in India, just as its language, dress, or customs do. When driven out of their geographical habitat by the unforgiving dictates of globalization, Indian communities attempt to hold on to their roots through a continuation of their traditional culinary practices, mingling or substituting the spices of the homeland with those that are available in their adopted lands, often giving rise to some Creole dishes. As such, food becomes one of the basic components of culture preservation among the Indian diaspora throughout the globe. As the immigrants try to recreate the cherished moments of the home through a mythic reconstruction of the dishes that attempt to bring back the taste and smell of their loved ones who served them once. The strong attachment of the first generation diaspora towards the Indian culinary practices and their attempt to recreate elaborate Indian meals in their adopted homes in the foreign land may be considered as a part of the nostalgic longing for homeland that the diaspora experiences. However, it may also be read as the resistance to the Western culture that most of the first generation migrants consider corrupting for their children. The tremendous importance of food, particularly the significance of the delicacies of homeland to a migrant's existence, may be judged through a close reading of the expository scene in Jhumpa Lahiri's The Namesake, where the protagonist, Homshik Ashima, attempts to make a compromised version of the jhalmuri. I have given the introductory quote from Namesake. It may be read here. This brilliant exposition at once reveals the cravings of the migrant soul for the touches of the homeland, the attempts to create a surrogate home with the strands of memory from the home lingering in the mind, and the resulting frustration from such futile attempts. The missing element in her Jhalmuri is correlative of the missing element of her life abroad. In Lahiri's short story, Mrs. Sen's, we find the character of Mrs. Sen, whose life in America revolves around the food that she prepares. There are only two things that make Mrs. Sen jubilant: a letter from her homeland and fresh fish. She has the typical Bengali obsession for fish and tries out compromised versions of Bengali delicacies like cutlets of tuna in place of bhetki, but is never satisfied with the end result. Finally, this obsession for fish brings about the catastrophe and snaps the bond that had just begun developing between Mrs. Sen and Elliot, a boy whom she babysits. Alternatively, this is the bond that was about to be formed between an Indian immigrant and the American milieu. Nostalgia is a part of human life in general. As a being of superior intellect, man is endowed with memory of the past events that connect him with his antecedents. Nostalgia is a fragment of this memory which is impossible to leave behind with all the other ties of the native land while migrating. Therefore, all meals that the first generation migrants cook are a shadow of the food they have tasted all through their lives. However, the situation changes with a change in generation among the diaspora. For the children of the Indian immigrants, the second generation diaspora, hamburgers, pizzas, peanut butter and jelly sandwiches take the place of rice and curries. Thus, when Mrs. Dotto in Chitra Banerjee's Mrs. Dotto writes a letter prepare Indian curries and fries seasoned with an extra dose of motherly love and a little bit of extra oil or ghee, her grandchildren complain to their mother and crave for the American fast food that Mrs. Dotto doubts their mother allows them to have behind her back. Resistance is futile. The youth conditioned in the environs of the host land finds the Indian food too spicy, oily, and cumbersome in contrast to the more convenient and easily available American, Italian, or Mexican alternatives. Conditioned by their peer groups, they feel more satiated by the bulk of fast food decorated upon the shelves of the supermarket or the food courts. And even if they consume the home cooked Indian dishes, it is more with an urge to please their parents and avoid unnecessary squabbles in the household. Food assumes altogether a new significance in Jhumpa Lahiri's story when Mr. Pirzada came to dine. The story is narrated by young Lilia, who recollects the visit of a certain Mr. Pirzada to their American home for a specific duration during the years of her growing up, and the anxiety that her family shared over Mr. Pirzada's concern for his family back at Dhaka at the time of Bangladesh Liberation War. Although separated by nationality and religion, Mr. Pirzada and Lilia's parents seemed no different to the girl in her childhood, as they talked in the same Bengali language, discussed and watched the same issues on the television, and ate the same Bengali delicacies. So when Lilia is not able to understand how her parents are different from Mr. Pirzada, interestingly, Lilia's father uses food as a metaphor to describe the difference between the nations. It may be again seen on the screen. Evidently, this story suggests the vagueness of the concepts like caste, creed, religion, or nationality among the diaspora, who all sail on the same boat of homesickness, irrespective of the geographical positioning of their real homes, and the food serves as a unifying bond, with eating together as a metaphor for transcending the domestic boundaries. To conclude, it may be said that in the diasporic space, food plays a significant role. It replicates the legacy of the great Indian kitchens left long back and enables the migrant to pamper his or her taste buds in the indulgence of feeling at home at a moment when all other senses are overpowered by the anxiety of separation from home. Food remains as one of the basic elements through which the diaspora seeks to preserve their culture, their tradition, while it simultaneously becomes an object of conflict between the successive generations. The younger generation fails either to inherit the taste buds of their parents seasoned with the Indian flavors, or to completely overcome the memory of the food catered to them in their years of growing up. A looming taste or an aftertaste stays back in their mouth because, in the words of M.G. Vasanji, we are but creatures of our origin, and however stalwartly we march, paving new roads, seeking new worlds, the ghosts from our past stand not far behind and are not easily shaken off. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Devabrata. We had a great time getting the flavors of jhalmuri and tuna cutlet. Well, questions? Any questions for Dr. Devabrata? No. Well, let's move on then to the next presenter, Apurna Brahmachari, and the title of her paper is "In Search of Lost Home: Rereading Three Novels of Nadia Hashmi." Are you there, Apurna? Yes.
Yes, ma'am, I'm there. Good afternoon, everyone. Ma'am, let me allow to present my screen.
Sure.
Okay. So, the title of my paper is In Search of Lost Home, rereading three novels of Nadia Hashimi. Um, for the let me adjust this. Ma'am, I'm reading my paper. I think I'm facing some problems with presenting. Okay, just give me some time. So, okay, so the title of my paper is In Search of Lost Home. Rereading three novels of Nadia Hashimi. So the concept of the paper is what my paper tries to do is to probe into the idea of lost home through three novels, through three diasporic novels of Nadia Hashimi. The novels I have chosen are A House Without Windows, published in 2016, The Sky at Our Feet, published in 2018, and Sparks Like Stars, published in 2021. So Nadia Hashimi is an US-born Afghan author who shot to fame with her debut novel, The Pearl That Broke Its Shell. Her novels are noted for undaunted documentation of classism, patriarchy, fundamentalism, and ethnocentrism as hegemonic discourse, composed against the backdrop of the Titalian history of Afghanistan. Hashimi's novels basically explore female agency. So, in my paper, what I would try to do is to analyze these three texts and constantly refer to the political background of Afghanistan. So, home in Afghan diasporic writing is a very interesting concept. It's a dynamic idea in Afghan diasporic writings. It is in receptacle the domestic space, the geographical territory, the mythical construction, as well as psychological domain. For diasporic authors, home or homeland is a dominant concern and it is central to the identity politics. So home, the idea of home primarily refers to the domestic corner of living and sustenance. It also signifies by extension of meaning, stability, comfort, belongingness, and the place of familiarity and all shared ties. Afghan diaspora writings primarily explore as well as establish plurality in terms of the concept of home. So, in order to form this comprehensive analysis of the concept of home in the context of Afghan diasporic writings, we must first understand what is home and why is it important in this context. So, Afghan diaspora's origin basically dates back to as early as in 1970s. As a country stuck in the muddle of brutal politics, both inside and outside its geographical territory, Afghan territory has turned into a site of conflict, discontinuity, and war. The general idea of home, if we refer to the Afghan homeland or Afghanistan, then gets totally challenged in the Afghan territory. It is interestingly related to the whole idea of the landscape and the political scape. So Afghanistan's map is itself, if you look into it, it's a site of intense political duel between two imperial forces, namely the Great Britain and the Imperial Russia or USSR. Obviously, the other internal factors were also there. Part of the great Indian subcontinent, Afghanistan's interiority has been repeatedly and politically dictated. I'm slightly quoting from the very first novel of Nadia Hashimi, where in the chapter 2, it is there that borders between Afghanistan and India were drawn and redrawn from time to time as if only penciled in. People belonged to one country and then the other, nationalities changing as often as the direction of the wind. For Great Britain and the Soviet Union, Afghanistan was the playing field for their great game and the power struggle to control Central Asia. The shifting borders were the result of the great imperial project. Afghanistan is an insular country located at the crossroads of Central Asia and South Asia, and so it's easy to understand why the political turbulence were mostly the results of this tricky border position. Um, so um, if I connect this with the political crisis with the refugee issues, only then I can come to the point of the paper. So the continuing political crisis and shifting political ideologies have gravely impacted Afghanistan's demography. Afghanistan has spilled millions of refugees across the border, and this forms the Afghan diaspora. Nadia Hashimi actually discusses these concepts in her novels, and it features Afghanistan against the backdrop of its historico-political background. Her novels deal with characters who are in some way or the other uprooted or separated from their home or homeland. Characters are internally or externally displaced. Home is either lost or taken away or devoid of its stable nature. The paper attempts to analyze three characters mainly: Yusuf, Jason, and Sitara, and their concept of home and the way the home is lost and such. So before going into that, I would just shortly refer to this quest motif in literature. So the quest motif is rather an old but popular motif. Walter Buckert argues that the frequent nature of the quest motif in literature is prehistoric, rather from the general coming from the hunter-gathering roots. The purpose of the journey is mostly to seek some lost knowledge or important treasure, maybe for beloved. So, quickly referring to the text, if we look into the text House Without Windows, you will find Yusuf is a member of the diaspora. He has returned to his original home, and that is homeland, as part of his war. Before coming to Afghanistan, he could feel actually the silent cry within him. It was a call, and it came from the land of clay and mountains. It was as if a siren had appeared in his dreams, begging him to save her from herself. And he heard her name on the radio station. He saw her face on magazine covers. The internet screamed her sorrows, and all. Each injustice called to him as if it were the only hope. So, um, actually, in part of his work, when he gets back to Afghanistan, he discovers his own homeland and discovers multiple nuances of his native culture. Almost a similar quest motif can be found in the novel The Sky at Our Feet, where we find the journey of Jason Didiasi, whose search of home is connected with this shattered childhood. Here, the child's perspective is important to get separated from his only parent, loses his home, and ultimately is bound to find his own identity. Sparks Like Stars takes the motive, or rather uses this quest for home in order to, reflect back on a typical moment in the history of Afghanistan, which is very crucial. It's the Saur Revolution. It's Sitara's quest for home, which has a lot to do with her own past. Being a survivor, Sitara comes to terms with her own past. So the quest for home is part of what I thought that is a important topic to discuss. Home as a space and the loss of it, how it is reflected in the works of Hashimi. So the quest for home, as seen in the works, are connected with identity politics. These characters in Hashimi's novels show the actual crisis involved in adapting to a new culture. They involve issues like the apparent clash between the two cultures that retain memories, and the intergenerational stories to maintain the crucial link are also the motives behind the quest for the original home. Um, so thank you. That was it. That was my paper. I welcome questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Apurna. So, yes, any questions for Apurna? No questions, then we can straight away move to the next presenter, Dr. Rashmi Jain. And
Yes,
the
ma'am,
title
I'm
of
here.
the paper is Status of Women in Monicali, Britain and Baptist Sidwa's Rights on Demand.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon to the chairperson and other members who are present in this Google Meet. Chandra Talpade Mohanty, in his Under the Western Eyes, has said that women are the first and the foremost victim of any kind of oppression, violence, or suppression, as an individual and collectively. So, Monica Lee's Brick Lane and Bapsi Sidhwa's Ice Candy Man explores the plight of the two immigrant women, Nazneen and Lenny, along with their respective struggle. Sense of rootlessness, identity crisis, dislocation, sense of belongingness, cultural divergence are found through the traits of these women. Nazneen, in Monica Lee's Brick Lane, was a Bangladeshi immigrant who ends up marrying an old man Chanu and ships to London, where she struggles between the new culture and the old tradition in which she was nurtured. Isolated, lonely, homesick condition of Nazneen was brought out. Chanu, Chanu even overburdens Nazneen with the work of stitching clothes, and one day she collapses and stays in the bed for several days to recover from her sickness. After a lot of struggle, she finally decides to speak up for herself and decides to stay back in London, whereas Chanu moves to Bangladesh. On the other hand, in The Ice Candy Man, Lenny, a Parsi child narrator who lived in undisputed India and after the partition went to Lahore, Pakistan. She suffered from polio, therefore, doctors has advised her to take rest and not to stress on her nerves with studies, as her ultimate aim is to get married and nurture children. So the prejudiced attitude towards women is completely visible. When her ayah Shanta was abducted, she tries to rescue her and voices the deplorable situation of women during the partition. The women who were abducted and later rescued by the government acted only as winning trophies. They are in no man's land, and nobody is ready to accept them, accept such women back. They are neither accepted by the society nor by their family. The subjugation of women has been portrayed through the arranged child marriage, prostitution, obsession with sexuality, and dangers of politically motivated violence. During the riots, the women were abducted, they were gang raped, molested, killed, they were made slaves and prostitutes, and so on. The horror of partitions are filled with such inhuman and barbaric attitude towards womenfolk. The Aya Shanta, who had multi ethnic admirers in the beginning, during the partition was dragged by the ice candy man who once claimed to be her lover. It is he who exploited her and sold her to a kotha. Towards the end, with the help of her godmother, Lenny saved and rescued her Aya Shanta. So, not taking too much of time, I would just conclude my paper. So, to conclude, it can be said that the status of women as an immigrant is full of struggle and challenges. Those who have an innate strength of willpower and an indomitable spirit emerge victorious against all the odds. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. Any questions for Dr. Rashmi? No questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rashmi. We can move on to the Tajid Ghosh. Tajid Ghosh, sir, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Am I audible?
Yes, perfectly audible. You can start.
So good afternoon, everybody, especially Sujata ma'am, the chairperson, and all other members present on the Google Meet. My paper today is Amitabh Ghosh's novel, The Circle of Reason, and the title is Deterritorialization, Identity Crisis, and Issues of Rights. Rereading Amitabh Ghosh's The Circle of Reason. Amitabh Ghosh is a well-known name in the arena of the world literature, especially as a novelist and prose writer. From the beginning of his literary career, he is interested in depicting diasporic identity, particularly Indian or South Asian diaspora in different countries of the world. In his novel, The Circle of Reason, Ghosh takes us to the Arabian city of Al Ghazira from some remote villages of Kerala and Bengal in India. The novel deals with the issues of illegal migration and the state of the migrant workers abroad. The novel also traces the life and predicament of a particular kind of diasporic community. These people are not the usually privileged, professionally trained individuals who form a large bulk of the global diaspora these days. So what are they? They are common men and women who are either forced to leave their country or leave it of their own will in pursuance of a dream of a better life somewhere far away from home. They form a bulk of illegal migrants crossing the border of their usual habitat without having any visa or passport. So they are different in this particular way. They are not legal migrants. They don't have any immigration papers. Gisbert Ung, in his book Global Indian Diasporas, has pointed out the existence of 4 types of diasporas. First, there was a flow of migration of the traders in the earliest time in search of a better prospect of trade and commerce. Indian coastal communities may be cited as a very good example of that. The second important flow was that of the Indian indentured laborers, much of whom were forced to leave their homelands in search of a better future. The third type of migration Ung talks about took place after the partition of India. Yesterday, the research persons also, they have talked at length about the migration from that part from Bangladesh to India and vice versa at the time of partition. So a large number of Hindus and Muslims from Pakistan and India moved across the border, fearing that the new government would be unable to protect the minority rights. These days, many highly educated professionals left India to find jobs as teachers, lawyers, and doctors in the Europe, especially in the UK, the US, and Canada. This has recently occurred again with the exodus of many IT professionals, we can say. Furthermore, numerous migrants have found work as construction workers or housekeepers in the Middle East since the time of 1970s. The last or the fourth type of migrants include those who are, we can say, twice migrants or second-time migrants. In The Circle of Reason, Ghosh depicts the plight of the second type of migrants that Ung points out. As the novel goes, The Circle of Reason, we have the protagonist, Alu, and the readers following his trail are taken from the Indian port of Mahe to an imaginary West African setting of Al Ghazira. It's an oil city of glitz and glamour. The journey in between introduces us with a number of characters, both male and female, mainly from the western coastal line of India, and of course, Jindi at Tifaha, a madam. All of them set sail on a small motor-driven vessel called Mariamma. Chunni, Kattamma, and Kulfi are the 3 women chosen by Jindi to work at her boarding house at Al Ghazira. Jindi, as it comes out, has turned into a madam after she failed to bear a child for her husband and expelled from her matrimonial house on account of her barrenness. So two factors come out here. The socio-economic factor, that one factor is her barrenness, and another factor is that of domestic violence and maltreatment, that she was driven out of the home on account of her barrenness. The condition of the migrant women on the rickety boat, Mariamma, as we come back to the boat once again, points towards the duality of both opportunity and oppression offered by migrancy. Both the tenets are there. On the one hand, there is the lure of money and better life, and on the other, there is the uncertainty of the promises made to them by the agents or the prospects that themselves have dreamt of. The challenge of coping with unknown circumstances, whether they would be favorable or unfavorable, hostile, that too in an unknown land, far away from the homeland, also adds to the anxiety. One thing that comes out in the middle, in the middle passage, in their journey to Al Ghazira, there was the woman whose name was Katama, and she was pregnant in an advanced stage. And now when she developed labor pain in between, but she resisted for the childbirth. She was asking for some forms. Now the forms are very much emblematic, very much significant here. For forms really mean for Katama is something mysterious, unknowable to others. But if we take her desire for a house and a car and all other material things, as Professor Samuel, he just revealed it to others because he knew her language. So it can be taken in the literal sense. So it can be interpreted as a general desire for material comfort. And the forms are the instrumental means of attaining that. The forms then are the symbolic source of material affluence in Katama's vision for her yet unborn child as a future citizen. So here comes up the issues of right. But in a figurative way, the forms are marked by a desire for home as a place of comfort, as a sense of rootedness and belonging, as a future time of a secure life. We have already introduced to Jindi. She has her house, boarding house at Al Ghazira. She also runs the tea shop there. That is the condition, in which condition these migrant workers, they take up the issues and the work condition there. She knows a lot of people, and in that part of the land, she gets her people jobs of different kinds. What kind of jobs? In construction, sweeping, gardening, shop work, household work, etc. Because she has much connection in exchange, of which they are to give her just a little. And they have plenty to send them back. In fact, as Jindi claims, she turns out to be a person of immense help to the migrant workers. She provides them with shelter, which is not at all easy to get in a foreign land, and holds and protects them as a dead mother. But the migrants or migrating women's diasporic communities in Al Ghazira, who take shelter at Jindi Aktipaha's home, they form a class of their own, along with other members. There are some other peoples, other migrants, Abu Fal, Jaglul the Pigeon, Alu, Professor Samuel, Abu Sa the Frown, Rakesh, Katama, we have already talked of her, Kulfi, Masram, and others. So they left their homes in search of a good job and prosperous life at Al Ghazira, like it is with all migrant workers. But there is a vital difference of this particular group with other migrant bodies. These people have crossed the border of their respective countries with a lot of hope and dream in their eyes, and found themselves landed in a geographically and culturally divergent place. But unlike them, these people are not equipped with papers needed to set a claim for legal stay abroad. So here there is a vital difference between legal migrants and illegal migrants that we have. So these people, they are not professionally trained people who can take advantage of the demand in the market. They are illegal migrants devoid of all the amenities to be bestowed on them by a foreign government, because they cannot ask any help, any amenities from the government. So Ghosh, by this way, extends the issue even further and depicts their marginal position as illegal migrants who form a minor subaltern class. His critical gauge extends to encompass the condition of their travel and working place as well. These migrants were subjected to economic exploitation and other forms of injustices. It's very clear from the incident that happened to one of the workers, that is Mastram. So Mastram found himself with only a third part of the wage that he was promised. For the contractor took all the rest. Two-thirds of the wage the contractor took away. So Mastram was quite young. He flew into a rage one night after drink, got enraged, and in front of others, he flew at the contractor's throat. So what happened next? He found himself with his skull split half open, without a job, without a place to stay, and blood all over his clothes. So this is the very condition in which illegal migrant workers, they are compelled to live. They don't earn that amount of money which they are really promised at the time of their journey, in the beginning of their journey. So they remain in a place which is something in between. They don't have all the amenities of the rights of their own. And even at that juncture, they don't find their identities, proper identities. Either even their identity is not disclosed to the police or to the authority, local authority, because they are illegal migrants, illegal workers. So this picture is enough to show the inhuman condition in which these subaltern workers are forced to work. The exploitation goes to length to deprive them of the wages that they are promised. The contractors take full advantage of their vulnerability along with the local authority. And here comes the question of insecurity and the intervention of the state. There is no question of protection to be offered to them by the government, as they have come to the place illegally. They can't even make an appeal to the authority about their misuse, for they don't possess the valid document to prove their identity as legal workers. They don't have work permit. These subaltern people, they are only left to pick and pine. But Al Gajira is just an instance, as is shown in Ghosh's work, a symbol that stands for all such working corners in different parts of the world these days that turn out to be exploitative zones of one kind or the other. So thus, if the dazzling star that is in the way of being constructed stands for modernity and its innumerable possibilities with the lure and dazzle, its collapse obviously signifies, we can say, the rottenness and loopholes of globalization, of which the novelist actually makes us aware. So by this way, actually, and I conclude, this paper actually works, it studies the migrant workers, particularly migrant women's experiences. I'm not detailing into that, as they come in contact with the people and the authorities of Al Jazeera in their effort to fulfill their desire for better lifestyle propelled by the tenets of globalization. It also offers the very condition of the poor and middle-class migrants in transition, those in-between nation states experiencing the psychic pangs of different sorts of conflict zones of diverse dimensions, and those moving between the states of home and homelessness. That's all. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jagdeep Ghosh. You have talked about the illegal migration and the problem of the migrants in the context of Amitabh Ghosh's research look. It's a good paper, sir. So, any questions to Jagdeep Ghosh? No, I think. Well, thank you once again. We can move on to the next presenters, actually. Rupali Mishra, Dr. Tamal Chakraborty, and Devanjan Mishra. Who is going to present?
So, thank you, ma'am. With your permission, can we share our screen?
You can start.
Thank you. Okay. So, thank you, and let me express our sincere gratitude for allowing us to share our thoughts in this seminar. So, my name is Dr. Tamal Chakraborty, along with my colleagues, Mrs. Rupali Mitra and Mr. Devanjan Mitra. We are going to present a paper titled Beyond the Prism of Bemoaning and Bonding, Wrongdoing and Right Doing, a reading of diasporic desires in And the Mountains Echoed. So, according to Oxford Online Dictionary, the word diaspora is defined as the dispersion or spread of a people from their original homeland. And historically, it was used first in reference to the dispersion of Greeks in the Hellenic world and later Jews after the Babylonian exile. But today, it is mostly used in reference to people who identify with a specific geographic location but currently reside elsewhere. So, in this paper, we have focused on the work of uh, Khaled Hosseini, who is an Afghan American novelist, UNHCR Goodwill Ambassador, and former physician. He was born in 1965, and his family later moved to Paris in 1976 because of the Soviet invasion of his homeland, Afghanistan. But despite the distance, his cord with his homeland was never severe. And his novel portray that and his homeland along with her beauty, her people, her trials. And later on, of course, Hosseini went on to become the author of international bestsellers, The Kite Runner, A Thousand Splendid Suns, and The Mountains Go. So in this paper, we are focusing on the third one, which is And the Mountains Echoed, which is a tale of decades of separation and eventual reunion of two siblings and of everything and everyone in between. So the storyline of And the Mountains Echoed is the following. Poverty forced the father of siblings Pari and Abdullah to sell off his daughter, and the little girl was bought by a wealthy but unhappy couple in Kabul. So the purchase was facilitated by their driver Nabi, who was incidentally the step uncle of Pari. But as time went on, Pari eventually lost all remembrance of her early life. But 60 years and, of course, hundreds of pages of the book later, the siblings got reunited. However, I must stress on this point that this book is not just a story of these two siblings, it is equally about the other characters whose lives and choices were instrumental in effectuating the reunion. The author has beautifully nailed his point that our destinies are not just our own. The circumstances we live in, the choices we make, or are forced to make, can have multifarious, multidimensional, and far reaching impact. They echo through time, space, and people. So, to continue with the rest of the presentation, I invite my colleague, Madam Rupali Mitra.
Thank you, Tamalda. I am Rupali Mitran. I shall be continuing with, I shall be highlighting the instances of diasporic desires in the text under consideration. Diaspora or dispersal of seed, as they say, now it has several associated connotations. Like dispersal means displacement, as in geographical displacement caused due to war or migration. Not always, but often, diaspora is associated with longing and loss. In fact, almost all my previous speakers have reinforced this point. Loss, as in some kind of loss of loved one, loss of identity, loss of memory, loss of freedom, loss of connection, etc. Now, I must say that this book, it is like a prism because it scatters diaspora into a rainbow, into a spectrum of different associated emotions. And we encounter several instances of loss and displacement and longing in the text. We will be highlighting 3 instances, each from a different point of view. Next slide, please, Tamalda. Next slide, Tamalda. The first instance that the first instance was, of course, the displacement caused due to war and political turmoil in Afghanistan. this led to the Afghan diaspora. And this caused some characters from the story to flee the country. Whereas the same war led other characters to arrive in Afghanistan. For example, the peacekeeping forces, the aid workers. So while some fled Afghanistan, other characters arrived. And this outflux and influx, it creates a sort of human eddy that takes the story, that takes our life, in fact, forward. And this, as we saw previously, that the author himself had a diasporic origin because his family had to flee Afghanistan. The second instance that we want to highlight is loss and longing for family. Here we see that the poor and motherless siblings, Abdullah and Pari, they had created a world of their own after their mother's demise. And Abdullah, he longed for his dead mother. He could see his mother's presence, reflection in his baby sister. And when they are separated, when the sister is sold off, this big brother is crushed because for him, she was the only family he thought he had. And for the rest of the story, we find Abdullah cherishing his sister's memory and he keeps looking for her. So despite being treated individually, this novel, in fact, is made of 9 different storylines and several characters. But in spite of being treated individually, they're all connected by these 2 very important events. One is the Afghanistan war, and the second was the separation and later reunion of Abdullah with his sister. The next instance, the next slide, please. The next instance is perhaps quite a complicated one. It is a loss of freedom and artistic expression through one of the very dramatic, overpowering female characters named Neela Wahadati, who was in fact the woman who had purchased the younger sister, Pari. Now, she was a poet, she was rebellious, she was reckless, she drank and smoked freely, and in the end, we find her committing suicide. With her sleeveless dresses and sunglasses, Neela was way ahead of Afghanistan times. She personified everything contrary to what her society demanded of its woman. So she was artistic, but she was a troubled soul. She felt trapped in her marriage. She felt trapped in her societal norms. Her dissatisfaction, her artistic cravings. Due to this artistic craving, she was disconnected from everything, from the world around her, from her husband, from her adopted child. She had paid for Pari, but she was childless, so she paid for Pari, but even with Pari, she could not bond. So these 3 instances, they highlight 3 different points of view of loss and longing. The first is because of war, the second is loss of family, and the third was the feeling of loss of freedom and artistic expression in this very overpowering female character. For the rest of the slide, I would request the next speaker, my colleague, Devanjan Mitra, to take over. Thank you.
Thank you to Rupalidi and Tamalda for expounding so well. I'll take over from here. I hope that I'm audible to everyone. So yes, what I intended to talk about is that when we talk of diaspora talks about a kind of bonding, not only of longing and belonging, but also the kind of bonding, the kind of bond which is established between what is expressed and what has been lost. So, of course, to me, the idea of dispersal also talks about how the whole idea of diaspora refers to the heart of the person or the persons who experience the experience of being dispersed from whatever they think are the native places of their origin, to which they can never return, but to which they return always emotionally, and that is the reference of the chord, which all my previous speakers have reinstated, and which is also reinstated in our presentation. So the idea of wrongdoing and right doing, and so I refer to Rumi, which is expressed in this slide, that it is not only a physical longing or a cultural longing, it is also spiritual longing. It is a artistic longing. It is also something by which identity, space, and experiences are colored. Can we move to the next slide, please, Tomalda? Thank you. Okay, so
Yes,
what
we're all done in the next slide.
yeah. So what we go on is, so therefore we come to the idea of homeland. We know that a place where one resides is a house. It is a place by which we identify the space in which we feel the most comfortable. But when we talk about home, it is also the emotional and the cultural, which ignites the feeling of vibrancy. So, the two quotes which we highlight has been taken from Salman Rushdie, who expresses the desire of the diasporic authors as well as the characters. There is a straddling which may be of two cultures, or as in these nine stories and throughout Hosseini and other writers, the idea of straddling between multiple cultures, something which all the previous speakers and we in our slides also look back to. And you see, the idea of immigration or migration is a physical one. But the idea of crisscrossing and hybridizing cultures and getting our experiences, getting to express ourselves through that lens is the idea of straddling. So we keep on interchanging, and this is the feeling of being diasporic. So this is what we call is the reflection of the diasporic desires in Khaled Hosseini, and this animates the whole series of books that he has written. And this is the same thing which we have tried to analyze in the previous slides regarding and the mountains egot. Can we move to the next slide, please, Tamalda? Yes. After that, I have given certain selections so that we can have
Yes, we are in the
say,
last slide.
yeah, we can have the textual and the critical aspect of what it means when we talk about this multifacetedness of moving between cultures. So the various expressions like finding purpose, finding meaning, how do we interpret experiences, how do we understand the idea of wrongdoing and right doing, which is referred to in our title, how do we understand the idea of truth, and how do we construe truth in our own manner, that also animates the idea of being diasporic. And therefore, the idea of culture, the idea of language, the idea of living itself is something which has deep repercussions in the diasporic novel. And my quotes, my very few selections, which I can show in this very small number of seconds offered to me, all of them show how diasporic desires interact and recreate such kind of expressions, experiences, and desires, which may be latent or which may come up, which may pop up from the lines through which we understand diasporic literature. Tomalda, can we move to the next slide, please? So that's all I think. That's our humble analysis in the few sparing minutes that we were offered. We thank all the organizers for giving us the opportunity to speak and to share some of our views. And I give the mic back to both of my colleagues if they want to express something regarding the whole experience. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Sudhata ma'am, for chairing the session.
Thank you. It was really nice listening to the three presenters, and it was really thought-provoking. Any questions for the presenters? No questions coming up. So thank you once again, Mrs. Supali Mitra, Dr. Kamal,
Thank you, ma'am.
and Satyavandit. So we can move to our next participant, Shrutishmita Ghoshal. Is she present? I think no. So our last presenter today, Bhaskar Chandra Sarkar, and the title of his paper is Exploration of Space and the Politics of Identity in Hamid, the Reluctant Fundamentalist. Mr. Bhaskar, are you here?
Yes, ma'am. I'm just presenting my PPT. Just give me some time.
Okay.
Okay, I think my PPT is visual, ma'am.
Yes, visible.
Okay, thank you, ma'am, and thank you, the organizing college department for title of my paper, as has been told by you, that the exploration of space and the politics of identity in Mohsin Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist. The concept of space in literature. In the realm of literature, space is a very vast area as it covers a large variety of spaces like physical space, psychological space, geographical space, ideological space, political space, etc. Actually, space is a multidimensional concept. Space here is meant not in literal way, but it encompasses various dimensions. When we'll try to define the space in a literal way, it is found that Homike Bhabha, in his The Location of Culture, used the term third space while describing the hybridity in post-colonial literature. According to Bhabha, third space is a mode of articulation, a way of describing a productive and not merely reflective spaces that surrenders new possibility. It is an interactive, interrogative, and uh, enunciative. After that, Henry Lefebvre talks about space, taking it to another level. He categorizes space into three ways: conceived, perceived, and lived space. After that comes Edward Souza, who draws on Lefebvre to develop his theories on space, but he extends the understanding of spatiality in several ways that have proved valuable in this study, especially to our understanding of lived space. He spells out important positions that are simultaneously censored and marginalized. Under the heading of third space, he incorporates some of the feminist and post-colonial criticisms of post-modern geographies by embracing issues articulated in the works of bell hooks and Gillian Rose, and among others. Thus, the concept of space and spatial theory begins, and it opens a new window of criticism. At the same time, through the politics of identity, I will try to explain the way in which characters are presented, depicted in the novel, as well as I will explore how one has to lose his or her identity, what are the reasons behind this loss of identity, and what types of crises they have to face after losing the identity. After losing identity, one has to again rebuild the identity in a new land, new background, and in a new way. This remaking of identity with the change of space is something very difficult to cope with, to manage, and to adjust with. Naturally, in this process, what happens is that one settled, established life turns out to be unsettled. Migration is one of the major events where one loses identity and has been forced to cope with the new environment and background. Mohsin Hamid, in his novel Exit West, aptly puts down the situation of migration, as he wrote, that is the way of things, for when we migrate, we murder from our lives those we leave behind. Now, coming to the novel that I have selected, The Reluctant Fundamentalist. Mohsin Hamid's novel, The Reluctant Fundamentalist, explores the complex relationship between space and identity crisis in the context of globalization and cultural difference. The novel unfolds before us the poignant situation that usually anyone belonging to the third world has to face. Though the novel begins with the meeting between a stranger foreigner and the protagonist Changez, and the meeting takes place in Pakistan. At that time, Changez starts to tell him about his life, various ups and downs in his career, and the struggles he faced in America, and the Islamophobic attitude of the white people towards him, especially after the attack in the World Trade Center by the terrorists. And finally, he left everything, his American dream, to settle in his own motherland and started teaching in a university. As per the narration of Changiz, he was a middle class man with the high ambition, a man with American dream. He managed to take admission in the Princeton University in America, and along with the study he needs to earn for himself as well as for his family. So he took a job of a financial analyst in the prestigious valuation company Underwood Samson after following a rigorous interview. He, along with other graduate students, went to Greece for vacation, and there he met Erika, and their relationship started to go deeper and deeper. But their relationship encountered difficulty as Erika was still emotionally attached to her deceased boyfriend Chris. In the meantime, he excelled in job and got opportunity to visit Manila. There happened an encounter with a jeepney driver, and this reminded Changiz of the harsh reality of his American dream and the separation from his root. During this visit, the news reached there that the World Trade Center has been attacked by the terrorists. On his return to America, he has to face and accept the Islamophobic attitude of the white men as he faced extensive security check at airport. He tried to reconnect with Erika, but came to know that due to the recent events, he went to depression and checked in an institution for the restoration of mental peace. After that, Changiz returned to Pakistan for a winter vacation and returned to America with long beard. And this brought him harsh looks and rude comments from the people on the streets, as the beard made him appear decidedly more Muslim. However, Changiz wore it with honor and in an act of defiance to America and solidarity with his people. After that, he has been assigned a task in Valparaiso, Chile, to evaluate a publishing company. There, he's meeting with Juan Bautista as he told him about the Janissaries, young Christian boys who were captured and trained to fight in the Ottoman army against their own people. He likened Changiz to these boys converted to foreign ideals and used to bring the economic downfall of others. Changiz saw the truth and of this comparison and suddenly decided to leave it all behind, quitting his job, saying goodbye to Erika, and leaving America. After returning Lahore, he becomes a professor of finance at the local university. His experience and insight in the world issues gains his admiration among the students. As a result, he becomes a mentor to large group of students on various issues. He and his students actively participate in demonstration against policies that were detrimental to the sovereignty of Pakistan. Changiz advocates non-violence, but a relatively unknown student gets apprehended for an assassination attempt on an American representative, which brings the spotlight on Changiz. In a widely televised interview, he strongly criticizes the militarism of the US foreign policy. In the novel, Lefebvre's concept of conceived and perceived space are relevant to the understanding of the complex relationship between space, power, and identity. Concept space refers to the abstract space of social and cultural representation, while perceived space refers to the physical space of our sensory experience. The novel explores the tension between the conceived space of America as a symbol of economic and cultural power and the perceived space of the city as a physical space in which the protagonist Changiz experiences prejudice and discrimination. Changiz perceives the physical space of the New York City, his sensory experience, but this is constantly shaped and meditated by the conceived space of America as a symbol of economic and cultural power. For example, he initially perceives New York City as a place of excitement and opportunity, but his experience is constantly colored by his sense of being an outsider and his growing awareness of the prejudices and power relations that shape his American society. Edward Soja's theory on the space and space posits that space are not neutral or objective, but rather they are socially constructed and reflect power relation and inequalities. In the novel, we see we can how the protagonist's relationship with space reflects his struggle with identity and power. As the Pakistani protagonist, Changez navigates the spaces of American elite. He becomes increasingly aware of the power dynamics at play and the ways in which his identity is marginalized. Changez describes his experience at Princeton University, where he was one of the only a few non-white students. I had never felt more conscious of my ethnicity than I did that day. It was as if I had suddenly waken up to discover that I was the only one in the room who was not wearing a suit. This is the quoted line from the novel Reluctant Fundamentalist. Through this quote, we can see how Changez's experience of space is marked by his sense of otherness and exclusion. Soja's theory on space helps to explain the process. Changez's relationship with American space is not neutral, but rather it reflects the power dynamics of the society in which he finds himself. His experience of space is shaped by his identity and his position in the social hierarchy. And identity crisis is central theme in the novel. The novel explores psychological and emotional turmoil experienced by the protagonist Changez as he struggles to reconcile his Pakistani identity with the experiences as a successful financial analyst in America. Throughout the novel, Changez grapples with the complexities of his identity on one hand, and he is proud of his Pakistani heritage and his Muslim faith. On the other hand, he is influenced by the glamour and wealth of American society, and he is determined to succeed in the corporate world. As he rises through the ranks at Underwood Samson, Changez finds himself increasingly disconnected from his roots, and he begins to question his own values and beliefs. The events of 9/11 heightened Changez's identity as an American educated Pakistani. He feels torn between his loyalty to his homeland and his affection for his adopted country. He is appalled by the violence of the terrorist attack, but he is also acutely aware of the anti-Muslim sentiment that sweeps through the America in the aftermath of the tragedy. As he navigates the complex politics of identity in the post 9/11 world, Changez becomes more and more alienated from his American colleagues and friends. In the final chapters of the novel, Changez's identity crisis comes to a head. He is forced to make a choice between his Pakistani identity and his American aspirations, and he ultimately chooses the former. The novel ends with Changez embracing his Muslim faith and his cultural heritage, and he prepares to return to Pakistan to work for the betterment of his own country. Just coming to the conclusion, we can say that Hamid's The Reluctant Fundamentalist proves to be one of the finest novels that depicts the projection of space and identity in a multi-layered way through the character of Changez and the social and political events that we found in the novel. That is the end of my paper, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Bhaskar. Any questions for Mr. Bhaskar Chandra Sarkar? No questions coming up. Then we can call it a day. Vidisha, are you there?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you all for such an amazing session, and we express our sincere gratitude to Dr. Sujata Bose for chairing this session so wonderfully. And our scholarly presenters have addressed varied subjects related to diaspora, and we are really enriched by their pluralistic attitude and approaches, of course. And here I would like to mention from my personal experience that I'm particularly happy to find Joydeep Ghosh sir. He has been my teacher in my during my graduation days. So thank you, sir, for joining this international seminar. And the participants, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you too.
Yeah. And all the participants are requested to fill in the feedback form, which will be shared by tonight in the WhatsApp group, and they will get a certificate very soon after the filling out the feedback forms. And so we are really touched by your responses. It means that it means a lot for to us actually, and this has been the first opportunity to host such an international seminar for our department, and our college has organized an international seminar in Bengali literature from the Department of Bengali actually in the last month, and we are hosting in this month too. And our institution will organize such seminars in the coming future also. So be with us, and thank you for all the cooperation. And so have a wonderful time ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
So we are finishing here, and good day.